Greetings, I am Reverend Yue McCormick, Head Minister of Endyuzan, Perfect Dragon Mountain, Shinganji, True Vow Temple, of the Nichiren Sangha of the San Francisco Bay Area. In this presentation in 3 parts, it is my goal to cover those things about the life of Nichiren Shonin that Nichiren Shu expects its clergy to know. I feel that this might also be of interest to dedicated lay practitioners, as well as those who are curious about Nichiren Buddhism and would like to know more about its founder. In addition to the history and teachings of Nichiren Buddhism, I have also drawn upon material from my narrative biography of Nichiren Shonin called Lotus in a Sea of Flames, and passages in the 7-volume series Writings of Nichiren Shonin, published by the Nichiren Shu Overseas Propagation and Promotion Association. As much as possible, I will allow Nichiren Shonin to tell his own story by reading passages from writings as found in the writings of Nichiren Shonin. On the slides, I will cite these volumes with the initials W and S, the volume number, and the page number of that volume. I also provide citations from corresponding passages, when there are any, in the writings of Nichiren Daishonin, which is in 2 volumes. I will cite these volumes with the initials W and D, and in the volume and page number. I cite these for the purpose of comparison with the Nichiren Shu translations, and on those occasions when they provide the only English translation widely available. Now let's begin the second of the 3 parts. In Kamakura, Nichiren Shonin took up residence in a hut on land provided for him in a district of the city called Matsu Bagayatsu, by the Nagoe Pass on the periphery of the city. Eiichi Tero states, "Recently, there is some thought that he began living in Kamakura as late as February 1256. It is said that Nichiren Shonin engaged in suji seppo, or street preaching, to the ordinary people, the peasants, merchants, craftsmen, fishermen, and lower to middle-ranking samurai. Eiichi Tero says, not only is his street preaching not mentioned in any of his writings, it was not mentioned in any of his biographies prior to the true biography of the great master Nichiren, Nichiren Daishi Shinjitsuden, written in 1867 by Taido Ogawa. Most probably, he taught and propagated the Dharma mainly within his own hermitage, various other convenient halls, and people's private homes." During this time, Nichiren Shonin first became recognized as a great teacher and reformer, dedicated to relieving the sufferings of the common people. He offered them the essence of the highest teachings of Buddhism in the form of the simple yet profound practice of the Odaimoku, so that they could attain Buddhahood. He also pointed out the errors of the elitist and decadent schools and movements which were distorting the true spirit of the Buddha Dharma. 2 of Nichiren Shonin's 6 major disciples joined him during this initial period of teaching in Kamakura. Nisho, a Tendai monk 1 year older than Nichiren Shonin, who had been impressed by him during their studies together on Mount Hiei, and Nisho's 9-year-old nephew, Nichido. Since his previous stay in Kamakura, the Pure Land teachings of Honen had become even more firmly entrenched in the life of the city. It seemed to Nichiren Shonin that people revered only the teachings of Honen and gave alms only to his disciples. At the same time, the Zen teachings had continued to receive the patronage of the Hojo clan, who ran the shogunate. The current regent, Tokiori, was especially enamored with the Zen teachings. He had commissioned the construction of a new temple on the northern border of Kamakura that was completed in 1253, called Kenchoji, or more fully, Kenchoji Kokoku Zenji, the Kencho-era Zen temple for the flourishing of the nation. The regent installed as its first abbot a Renzai monk from China named Lanshi Daolong, or in Japanese, Rankei Doryu. The years of the Kensho era, 1249 to 1256, were unusually wet and cold. The final year of that era saw excessive rains, freezing temperatures in spring and summer, violent winds, floods, and landslides that caused many deaths and widespread destruction of crops. This was followed in turn by famine, which led to the outbreak of multiple epidemics. At the age of 29, citing ill health, Hojo Tokiori retired from the position of regent in the 11th month to take the tonsure and become a lay monk, though he continued to maintain his power over the Hojo clan, and therefore over the shogunate from his residence at Saimyoji, one of Kenshoji's sub-temples. Nichiren Shonin wrote in his treatise on the elimination of calamities, Sainan Taiji Sho, "Looking at the state of this country today, we are experiencing various disasters. From the 8th month in the 88 year of the Kensho period, 1256, To the second month in the second year of the Shogun period, or 1260, disasters such as severe earthquakes, unreasonable high winds, and widespread, or rather unseasonable high winds, and widespread famines and epidemics keep on occurring in succession without ending even today. It is as though almost all the people of this country had perished. Of all the disasters that occurred during those years, perhaps the worst of them was the great earthquake of August 23rd, 1257. An historical chronicle of those years called The Mirror of the East reported this earthquake. According to Laurel Rod in her book Nichiren, Selected Writings, the passage from The Mirror of the East says, "Earthquake around 8 p.m. No shrine or temple left standing in Kamakura. Landslides, houses collapsed. The earth opened and water gushed out, or flames burned up with a blue glow." Nichiren Shonin wrote in The Reason for Submitting the Risho Onkokuran Gokanyorai, "At the time when the hour of the dog gives way to the hour of the boar, which would be around 9 p.m., in the evening of the 23rd, in the 8th month, in the first year of the Shoka era, 1257, with the cyclical sign Hinotomi, the severest earthquake we ever had took place. It was followed by a typhoon on the 1st of the 8th month in the second year of the Shoka era, 1258, a serious famine in the third year of the same era, 1259, and widespread epidemics in the first year of the Shogun era, also 1259, which remained rampant throughout the 4 seasons in the following year, causing more than half the people to die. Meanwhile, rulers of Japan, greatly alarmed, had Buddhist and non-Buddhist priests perform devotional services. None, however, failed to avert the national calamities. They only intensified the severity of the famines and epidemics. Nietzsche then wondered about all the suffering he saw around him. In his treatise on spreading peace throughout the country by establishing the true Dharma, Risho Onkokuran, itself, he wrote, "Why is Buddhism in this country so powerless? How did this come about? What is the matter with this country?" To find answers, Nietzsche then left Kamakura in the first month of the second year of 1258. He hoped to find some answers to these unsettling questions. He traveled west to a Tendai temple called Jisoji in Suruga province to make use of its extensive library. There he met Nikko, only 12 at the time, who became one of his 6 major disciples. Nichiren Shonin wrote in The Reason for Submitting the Risho Onkokuran, "Encountering this terrible state of the nation, I, Nichiren, studied all the scriptures of Buddhism, in which I found scriptural proofs answering why various prayer services are of no avail, only intensifying disasters. Finally, I could not refrain from composing a written opinion, entitling it The Treatise on Spreading Peace Throughout the Country by Establishing the True Dharma, Risho Onkokuran. I submitted this to the late lay priest Lord Saimyoji, meaning Hojo Tokiori, at 8 o'clock in the morning on the 16th day of the 7th month in the first year of the Bono era, through his chamberlain, lay priest Yadoya. It was nothing but a way for me to repay what I owe my country." As Nichiren Shonin stated, on July 16, 1260, he presented the Risho Onkokuran to Hojo Tokiori, the retired regent who was the actual ruler of the Kamakura shogunate. In this work, Nichiren Shonin argued that the government should stop sponsoring the Pure Land teachings and instead support those which upheld faith in the Lotus Sutra. If it did not, Nichiren Shonin warned, Japan would be faced with further disasters, but would especially be in danger from civil war and foreign invasion. However, if Japan turned to the Lotus Sutra, then peace and prosperity would be established. In a later writing, Selecting the Right Time, Senji Sho, Nichiren Shonin states that this occasion of presenting the Risho Onkokuran to Hojo Tokiori was the first of 3 warnings that he gave to the shogunate. He wrote that he told the lay priest Yadoya at that time, "Please tell the former regent to prohibit the Zen and Pure Land schools. Otherwise, fighting will break out within the Hojo clan, and Japan will be attacked by foreign powers." There are many things that must be kept in mind about these stern admonitions to the government. The first is that the conditions of one's life are reflections of one's inner life, and this is just as true for a nation as it is for an individual. This is why Nichiren Shonin insisted upon a positive faith in the ability of ordinary people to attain Buddhahood and transform this world into a pure land, as taught by the Lotus Sutra, rather than to have a fatalistic attitude towards this life and to only look forward to a happy life after death, as taught in the Pure Land movement. The second is that Nichiren Shonin's admonition to the government in the form of a treatise demanding the sponsorship of the true teaching as opposed to deviant teachings was part of a long tradition in East Asia that had roots all the way back to the attempts of Confucius to reform the government of his day. Nichiren Shonin was by no means the first or the only one to have done this. The third is that Nichiren Shonin was not advocating the persecution of other schools of Buddhism or the establishment of a state religion. Rather, he was calling for the shogunate to cease sponsoring harmful interpretations of Buddhism and instead sponsor the teaching which was actually in accord with what Shakyamuni Buddha taught in the sutras. In any case, all religious institutions in Japan at that time could only operate with the approval and or the patronage of the government. Finally, the Rishoen Kokuran was not a nationalistic document arguing for the superiority of Japan, but was instead a critique of the shogunate's management of religious affairs. It was a document aimed at spiritual reform for the sake of the Japanese people, so that they could overcome their suffering and ultimately have something of true value to share with the rest of the world, the true teaching and practice of the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren Shonin's efforts to promote reform were not only ignored, but they aroused the resentment of the Buddhist establishment, as well as those in the shogunate who did not appreciate his criticism of their rule. He was even challenged to a debate by leading Pure Land monks. In the fragment of a letter called On Religious Debate and Confrontation, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "In religious debate, I defeated my opponents with 1 or 2 words, while they did not speak even a few words. My opponents were those such as Do Amida Butsu of the Zenkoji Temple and Noan of the Choanji Temple, who represented the Pure Land school of Kamakura. After losing the debate, they increased their attacks against me, won innocent priests and people to their side, and persecuted me. In addition, they appealed to stewards in provinces and those in power in the military government, attacked my hermitage day and night, stormed me with sticks and swords, and made numerous false charges to aristocrats, saying that Nichiren was a slanderer of the true Dharma, of false views, and that he spoke evil and committed crimes. Finally, around 8 o'clock in the evening on the 12th day of the 5th month last year, thereafter missing." The rest of the story is told by Nichiren Shonin in a letter refuting Ryokanbo and others. As a result, men in power therefore gathered together and induced several tens of thousands of townspeople to attack me in my hermitage at midnight and try to kill me. Perhaps it was due to the protection of the 10 female Rakshasa demons, guardian deities of the Lotus Sutra, but I was saved that night. Fortunately, Nichiren Shonin had been alerted to the threat and escaped into the hills. For several months, he stayed with supporters outside the city of Kamakura, where he continued to teach the Lotus Sutra. Eiichi Taro says, "The attack was not by chance. It was engineered by powerful people such as Hojo Shigetoki, a lay priest of Gokurakuji Temple, and his son, the regent Hojo Nagatoki. They became the driving force behind the scheme to instigate Nembutsu believers and others in the town to murder Nichiren Shonin. It is not thoroughly certain as to the actual date when the attack occurred. It is said to have occurred on August 27, 1260. From recent research, and in light of the writing On Religious Debate and Confrontation, Dondon Tekitai Gosho, it is thought that the attack took place on the evening of May 12, 1261, 1 year after the submission of the Risho Onkokuran. This occasion is traditionally commemorated on August 27th as the persecution at Matsubagayatsu, the first of the 4 great persecutions which would befall Nichiren Shonin. Shortly after returning to his restored residence in Kamakura, Nichiren Shonin was arrested by the shogunate. In a letter to the lay priest of Ichinosawa, the Ichinosawa Nyudo Gosho, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "On the 13th day of the 5th month in the 1st year of Kocho, 1261, I was censured by the Kamakura shogunate and exiled to the Ito section of Izu province, where Minamoto Yoritomo had once been banished. Before long, however, I was pardoned and returned to Kamakura in the 2nd month of the 3rd year of the same era." Eiichi Taro points out, however, that in his letter to the lay priest of Ichinosawa, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "On May 13th I incurred displeasure with the Lord." If the attack on the hermitage had been on May 12th, then his arrest occurred on May 13th. Traditionally, however, this second persecution is commemorated on May 12th, 1261, as the Izu exile. Nichiren Shonin's enemies, such as Hojo Shigetoki and the regent Hojo Nagatoki, hoped that he would die of exposure to the elements. However, he survived with the assistance of a local fisherman and his wife. Later, the local steward, Lord Ito Hachiro Zaemon Nojo, also befriended him after overcoming a serious illness with the help of Nichiren Shonin's prayers. The steward not only provided for Nichiren Shonin, but he also bestowed upon him a statue of Shakyamuni Buddha that Nichiren Shonin kept with him until his death. Far from feeling defeated, Nichiren Shonin felt that being exiled had enabled him to live the Lotus Sutra with his whole being 24 hours a day. While others only read the sutra, Nichiren Shonin was able to live in accord with its teachings even at the risk of his life. Nichiren Shonin also spent his exile reflecting upon his mission. At that time, he realized that anyone who teaches the Dharma must discern the differences in the teachings, the capacity of the practitioners, the nature of the times, the characteristics of the country, and the proper sequence of the teaching. Nichiren taught that these 5 guides for propagation, so that his disciples would know how to teach the Dharma effectively. Nichiren Shonin also realized that since he had aroused the 3 powerful enemies spoken of in chapter 13 of the Lotus Sutra, being self-conceited lay people, self-conceited clergy, and arrogant monks who consider themselves sages, he must be a true practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, or the Hokkekyo no Gyoja. As he mentioned in the passage above, on February 22nd, 1263, Nichiren Shonin was finally pardoned and allowed to return to Kamakura. The main instigator of his exile, Hojo Shigetoki, had died on November 3rd, 1261. It seemed to Nichiren Shonin that Hojo Tokiori had known all along that the charges brought against him were baseless, and felt somewhat guilty for the part he had played in the exile of an innocent man. Still, time was needed for things to settle down, so he delayed granting the pardon for over a year. Nichiren Shonin hoped that eventually he would be called upon to meet the former regent once more, but no invitation came. 9 months to the day after his pardon, Hojo Tokiori also passed away, though only in his late 30s. With the death of Tokiori, the only person in a position of power who might have understood him, Nichiren knew that it would be more difficult than ever for his proposals to be adopted by the shogunate. Seeing no point in remaining in Kamakura, Nichiren Shonin visited the homes of his lay supporters in the surrounding provinces, giving lectures and teaching the practice of Daimoku. While spreading the teachings among his lay followers and instructing his disciples, Nichiren Shonin never forgot the danger faced by all Japan if the warning he gave in the Rishoan Kokoran was not heeded. His fears only deepened on July 5, 1264, when the great comet of the Bunei era appeared in the northeastern sky. In the reason for submitting the Rishoan Kokoran, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "Afterwards, on the 5th of the 7th month in the first year of the Bunei era, 1264, a comet appeared in the eastern sky, shining over almost the entire land of Japan. It was the worst omen we ever had since the beginning of the world. None of the scholars, Buddhist and non-Buddhist alike, knew what caused it. I felt all the more saddened as I knew it was an omen foretelling the foreign invasion of Japan." It was during that time, when the great comet of the Bunei era still loomed over Japan, that he received a message that his mother had fallen ill and was close to death. Nichiren Shonin had been unable to visit his home for 10 years because of the threat against his life posed by the steward, Tojo Kagenobu. He had not even been able to return home to perform memorial services for his own father. This time, however, he was determined to take the risk. With only a handful of disciples, he stealthily made his way back to Kominato. Nichiren Shonin returned in August of 1264, and through his prayers he enabled his mother to recover. She lived for 4 more years. Afterwards, Nichiren Shonin and his disciples were invited to the home of Kudo Yoshitaka, the lord of Amatsu. On the way, they were ambushed by Tojo Kagenobu and his men in a place called Komatsubara, or the Pine Forest, on November 11, 1264. Hearing of the ambush, Kudo Yoshitaka rushed to the rescue with his own forces. In the ensuing battle, both Kudo Yoshitaka and Tojo Kagenobu received mortal wounds. Hyoninbo, one of Nichiren Shonin's disciples, was also killed, and 2 others were seriously wounded. Nichiren Shonin himself barely escaped with his life, having received a blow to the head and a broken left wrist. Reflecting on this incident in a letter to Lord Nanjo Hyoei Shichido, or the Nanjo Hyoei Shichiro Dono Gosho, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "On the 11th day of the 11th month of this year, on the thoroughfare of Matsubara in Tojo, Awa province, about 4 to 6 o'clock in the afternoon, hundreds of Nembutsu followers ambushed me. I was accompanied by about 10 people, of whom only 3 or 4 were strong enough to fight. Arrows shot by Nembutsu followers were falling like rain, and their swords were flashing like lightning. One of my disciples was killed on the spot, and 2 others were seriously wounded. I also was hit and wounded, and faced mortal danger, but somehow I escaped death and am still alive today. My faith in the Lotus Sutra has been strengthened as I experience persecutions such as this. It is said in the 10th chapter, the teacher of the Dharma, in the Lotus Sutra, fascicle 4, many people hate it, the Lotus Sutra, with a passion even in my lifetime. Needless to say, more people will do so after my death. And in the 14th chapter, Peaceful Practices, fascicle 5, it states, many people in the world would have hated it, the Lotus Sutra, and few would have believed it. There are many people in Japan who read and study the Lotus Sutra. Many people are punished because they steal or commit adultery, but no one has been punished due to his faith in the Lotus Sutra. Therefore, none of the followers of the Lotus Sutra in Japan have practiced the sutra as it is preached. Only I, Nichiren, have truly read it. This is what the chapter of encouragement for upholding this sutra states. We will not spare even our lives. We treasure only unsurpassed enlightenment. Therefore, I, Nichiren, am the foremost practitioner of the Lotus Sutra in Japan. This third persecution is commemorated on November 11th as the Komatsubara persecution. Soon after the persecution, probably while hiding in the monk's residence within Rengeji Temple in Hanabusa, Nichiren Shonin was able to meet with his old master Dozenbo. At that time, Nichiren Shonin tried again to convince his master to turn away from the practice of Nembutsu and to uphold the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren Shonin remained in the countryside propagating and teaching the Lotus Sutra and lecturing on the great calming and contemplation of Tiantai Juri. During these years, he was joined by Nikko in 1265, Nicho in 1267, and Nichiji in 1270. All three were men in their teens when they joined Nichiren Shonin, and all three would later be numbered among Nichiren Shonin's 6 major disciples. Nichiren Shonin returned to Kamakura in 1268 after Mongol envoys from Korea arrived in Japan demanding tribute from the Japanese on the 18th of the first month of 1268. The Mongols had already conquered a vast empire that stretched from Asia to the borders of Europe. They threatened to invade Japan if they were not given satisfaction. An excerpt from their letter reads, "The sage treats all within the 4 seas as family. Could it be the principle of a family not to mutually exchange friendly greetings? As for using soldiers and weapons, who would want that?" The shogunate refused to negotiate with the Mongols, who had already successfully invaded China and Korea. It seemed as though invasion were imminent. In his postscript to the Rishoen Kokuran, on Kokuran Okugaki, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "It has been 9 years since I finished writing the Rishoen Kokuran in the first year of the Bunno era, when a letter of state arrived from the great Mongol Empire in the West. On the 18th day of the first intercalary month in the 5th year of the Bunno era, 1268, making clear its threats to invade Japan. A written challenge came again in the 6th year of the Bunno era. My prediction in my written opinion, Rishoen Kokuran, has proven to be true. Contemplating the future on the basis of this, I should say that my prediction in it will also not fail to be true in the future. Though this writing of mine has been attested to be true, it is not due to my own power, but rather it is a divine response to the true words of the Lotus Sutra." Twice more emissaries were sent in the following year, in March and November of 1269, by the Mongols. In a reply to Lord Ota Jomyo, Kingo Dono Gohenji, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "I believe that whether or not the teaching of the Lotus Sutra will spread depends on the prediction of civil war and foreign invasion that I made in a written opinion, the Rishoen Kokuran, being proven true or not. Last year, when the Mongol state letter arrived foretelling the coming of foreign invasion, I wrote letters to various people, leaders in the political and religious worlds of Japan, demanding a public debate, without receiving any answer, negative or affirmative. As the Mongol state letter came again this year, I wrote letters again to various places around the 11th month, with some of them responding. It seems that the feeling of the people in general has calmed down, so as to make them think that I, Nichiren, might be right." Ryokanbo Nensho was a monk from Yamato province, Nara prefecture, who was ordained by Eisan of the Saidaiji temple in Nara, who was the founder of the Shingon Ritsu school, or the mantra discipline school. The picture here shows the statue of him at Jodoji Temple in Miyake-cho, his hometown. Ryokanbo was invited to Kamakura to propagate the mantra discipline school teaching by Hojo Nagatoki. He founded such temples as Gokodakuji Temple in Kamakura under the patronage of Hojo Tokiori, and Nagatoki and Tohoji Temple in Kamakura at the request of Hojo Naritoki. While residing in Kamakura, Ryokanbo undertook several social welfare projects such as building hospitals and roads. In addition to promoting the Shingon or mantra school teachings, he promoted the practice of Nembutsu and was also known for scrupulously upholding the 250 precepts of the Dharmagupta Vinaya taught in the Ritsushu, the monastic rules of pre-Mahayana Buddhism. Nichiren Shonin saw all of this as an attachment to forms of Buddhism that were no longer effective and therefore a form of slander because they turned people away from the Lotus Sutra and the practice of Odaimoku. On June 25, 1277, Nichiren Shonin ghost wrote a letter, Yorimoto's Letter of Explanation, or the Yorimoto Chinjo, for his disciple Shijo Kengo to present to his lord, in which he described in the third person what he saw as a spiritual struggle between himself and the Okanbo Ninsho back in the middle of June of 1271, just before the attempt to execute him at Tatsunokuchi and his subsequent exile to Sado Island. In this letter, Nichiren Shonin expresses his belief that Ryokanbo was one of those who petitioned the government for his execution. This is also one of the only occasions in which Nichiren Shonin directly claims to be a reincarnation of superior practice Bodhisattva. Here is the relevant portion of that letter. It is stated in your lordship's letter that your lordship reveres Ryokanbo, chief priest of the Gokodakuji temple, as if he were an incarnation of Shakyamuni Buddha. However, this is difficult for me to accept, because if the teaching in the sutras is correct, Nichiren Shonin is a reincarnation of Bodhisattva superior practice, a practicer of the essential section of the Lotus Sutra, and a messenger of the eternal Shakyamuni Buddha, who attained Buddhahood in the remotest past, according to the essential section of the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren Shonin is a great leading master in the beginning of the fifth 500-year period after the Buddha's extinction. Who presented the petition for beheading Nichiren Shonin? He was sentenced to death, but for some reason he was not executed. Instead, he was exiled to Sado Island. Was not this all due to priest Ryokan? His petition is on the enclosed sheet. Ryokanbo, who preached day and night during each of the 6 precept-observing days not to cut even growing grass, so as not to commit the sin of killing living things, submitted an appeal for beheading a monk propagating the true Dharma, the Lotus Sutra. Is this not a contradiction on his part? Is he not tormented by a demon? This situation stemmed, however, from Ryokanbo's sermons, in which he lamented that although he wished to help all the people in Japan be followers of the precepts and uphold the 8 precepts of abstinence in order to stop them from killing living things and drinking liquor, his wishes had been frustrated by priest Nichiren's slandering him. Hearing of this, Nichiren Shonin said that he wanted to save the Ryokanbo from falling into the hell of incessant suffering by helping him to free himself from his self-conceited, misleading, and deceiving ways. We, the disciples of Nichiren Shonin, then responded in unison, "Your compassion shows truly the mercy of a practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. However, as the Ryokanbo is now respected by the people of Japan, especially by the Lord of Kamakura, it could be of great risk to you to undertake such an endeavor." In the meanwhile, on the 18th of the 6th month of the 8th year of the Bunei era, 1271, at the height of a great drought, Ryokanbo was ordered by the shogunate to perform a ceremony to pray for rain in order to save millions of people. Having heard the news, Nichiren Shonin declared, "This may be a very small matter, but it's best that I inform the public of the divine power of the Lotus Sutra." He sent Suhobo and lay priest Irusawa as his messengers to Ryokanbo to propose that if Ryokanbo succeeded in making the rain fall within 7 days, Nichiren would become his disciple, observe the 250 precepts, and stop insisting that the teaching of the Nembutsu leads to the hell of incessant suffering. If, however, Ryokanbo should fail, Nichiren's proposal continued, it will be clear that he is, in fact, a man who misleads and deceives the people, though he looks like a sincere follower of the precepts. There have been many such challenges in which prayers for rain decided the superiority of doctrines, as for instance the competition between Gomyo and Grandmaster Dingyo, and the one between Shubin and Kobo in the Heian period. Since both Suhobo and lay priest of Iwasawa were disciples of the Ryokanbo and also devotees of the Nembutsu, Nichiren Shonin said to them, "Until this moment I have not considered the 2 of you believers in what I teach. This is therefore the best opportunity for you to determine which is the true teaching. If it rains within 7 days, you should continue to have faith in the teaching of the Nembutsu and the 8 precepts of abstinence, as you have believed so far as a means of rebirth in the Pure Land. If it does not rain, however, it behooves you to embrace the Lotus Sutra earnestly, keeping in mind that the 8 precepts of abstinence and the Nembutsu are useless for rebirth in the Pure Land." As a result of this exchange, they were delighted to make their way to the Gokohakuji temple to pass the message to Ryokanbo. The Okanbo was pleased to hear this and began to pray for rain with over 120 disciples. Their heads were reeking with sweat as they chanted the Nembutsu, recited the prayers for rain sutra and the Lotus Sutra in voices loud enough to reach heaven, and preached the 8 precepts of abstinence. However, after 4 or 5 days, no rain fell at all. Quite at a loss, Ryokanbo gathered several hundreds of disciples from the Tahoji temple and prayed with all his might, but it did not rain at all, not even a drop in 7 days. Nichiren Shonin then sent his messengers to the Ryokanbo 3 times to tell him, even Izumi Shikibu, an amorous poetess, and priest Noin, a depraved monk, could succeed in making rain fall in an instant with 31-syllable poems, though they were prohibited as being a sham and a fake, did they not? On the contrary, you, Ryokanbo, foremost upholder of the precepts, master of the true teaching of the Shingon and the Lotus Sutra, who is admired for being the most merciful priest at present, prayed for rain with several hundreds of disciples. Why is it that you are unable to cause rain to fall in 7 days? Think it over. How is it possible for those who cannot jump over a 6-foot wide canal to jump over a 20 or 30-foot wide canal? You failed to produce rain, a much easier task. How can you succeed in the more difficult task, as helping people to be born in the pure land of Amitabha Buddha? If you would consider your future existence, you would relinquish your evil hatred of Nichiren and come to see me as agreed. Let me teach you how to make rain fall and to attain Buddhahood. Not only was there no rainfall in 7 days, but in fact the drought grew more severe, stormy winds blew more ferociously, and the people grew more desperate. In the evening of the 7th day, messengers from Nichiren Shonin told Ryokanbo to stop his praying immediately. Ryokanbo shed tears of disappointment and embarrassment, and both his disciples and followers cried loudly in vexation. Nichiren Shonin declared, when I, Nichiren, was condemned by the shogunate the other year, I hid nothing when responding to their interrogations. If the Ryokanbo, however, did not want to expose his shame to the world, he would have hidden himself in the woods or become my disciple as promised. Then we might say he is a man of some aspiration for Buddhahood. On the contrary, he spread countless lies and tried to have me executed. Does he still deserve to be admired as a respectable priest? Since I myself have seen and heard of this, though I am willing to obey your lordship on almost any matter, when it comes to the Ryokanbo, I cannot obey your lordship's instructions and revere him as an incarnation of Shakyamuni Buddha. Nichiren Shonin never received any direct replies from the Ryokanbo Nincho. However, he did receive a letter written on July 8, 1271, from a monk of the Pure Land school named Gyobin, challenging him to a debate. The letter reads, from Gyobin, although I have never met you, it is customary to take this opportunity to approach you and ask some questions. According to a rumor, your doctrines are indeed dubious. First of all, you hold that the sutras expounded before the Lotus Sutra are all false and do not lead people to Buddhahood. Secondly, you insist that Mahayana and Hinayana precepts confuse people, causing them to fall into evil realms. Thirdly, you maintain that the Nembutsu is a karmic cause of falling into the hell of incessant suffering. Fourthly, you also assert that Zen is a teaching of a heavenly devil, and if people were to practice it, their wrong views would only be strengthened. If you have claimed all this, you are indeed the loathsome enemy of Buddhist teaching. Therefore, I would like to meet you to refute your wrong views. However, if these are not your thoughts, it is a shame that you have received such a notorious reputation. At any rate, kindly reply in detail regarding the truthfulness of the above. On the 13th, Nichiren Shonin replied, in regards to your questions, I do not think we should have a private debate, as that would be meaningless. If you are inclined to a public debate, however, you should appeal to the shogunate to stage one in order to truly decide which view is right according to its instructions. As far as I am concerned, I sincerely hope that you will make such a proposal. Instead of trying to arrange a public debate, Ryokanbo, Gyobin, and other Pure Land priests presented a list of 10 accusations against Nichiren Shonin to the shogunate. Nichiren Shonin responded to this in the writing Understanding Gyobin's Petition, which states, Ryokan Shonin, who is reputed to be the most dedicated observer of precepts in Japan today, as well as such Buddhist priests as Nen Amida Butsu and Do Amida Butsu, Honen Shonin's grand disciples, state in their petition that they want to debate with Nichiren in order to refute his erroneous views and help the right doctrine of Buddhism to prosper. I, Nichiren, welcome this rare opportunity to refute the evil teachings of the Ryokan and others in a public debate. It will be my pleasure to help the true Dharma of the Lotus Sutra to prosper. In their petition, they question how one can claim that there is only one right teaching, and thus all others are wrong, when it is said that the Buddha preached 84,000 teachings. Yet, the meditation master Tao Cho states in his collection of passages concerning rebirth in the Pure Land, "Now it is the latter age of degeneration, when the world is filled with defilements and corruption. Only the Pure Land school is the path to Buddhahood." Venerable Shan Dao also states in his hymns of praise concerning rebirth in the Pure Land, "Not even 1 out of 1,000 people is able to attain Buddhahood through any teaching other than the Pure Land teaching." And Shonin states in his collection of passages on the Nembutsu in the original vow, "Abandon, close, set aside, and cast away" the Lotus Sutra. Although they all insist that only one is right and others are all wrong, Nen Amida Butsu Shonin and others insist to say one is right and others are all wrong is slandering the true Dharma. This is obviously a refutation of their main masters Daojo, Shan Dao, and Honen. Are they not their masters? Or does Ninsho Ryokan Shonin side with Nen Amida Butsu and believe they are right? In their petition, they also accuse Nichiren of being affixed solely to the Lotus Sutra and slandering all other Mahayana sutras. However, this is not my idea, but the Buddha himself declared in the Sutra of Infinite Meanings, "The truth has not been revealed for 40 years or so." And in the Lotus Sutra, "The truth will be expounded in this sutra," and "The truth will be revealed and expounded explicitly." The Buddha of Many Treasures further attested to the truth by saying, "The teachings that have been expounded are all true." Numerous Buddhas from all the worlds throughout the universe also approved these to be true by touching the Brahma heavens with their tongues. Comparing the Lotus Sutra with the sutras that have been preached, are being preached, and will be preached, the Buddha only praised the Lotus Sutra. So did other Buddhas. This is not my personal view. Besides, Grandmaster Tokuitsu of the Hoso school in Nara tried to refute Grandmaster Denyo with the same criticism during the eras of Endyaku, Daido, and Konin, 782 to 824, and was defeated by Denyo. As a result, the Tendai Lotus School was established in Japan. This petition also states that Nichiren insists that the sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra were all false. This also is not my personal opinion, because it is preached in the Sutra of Infinite Meaning. I have not yet revealed the truth yet for 40 years or so. Not revealing the truth is tantamount to false words. In a parable chapter in the second fascicle of the Lotus Sutra, it is stated that when the Buddha asked the congregation whether or not they believe the Buddha preaches any lie, they all replied no. The Buddha also asked the question in the lifespan of the Buddha chapter in the sixth fascicle of the Lotus Sutra, "Do you think that anyone can accuse this excellent physician of falsehood?" Then the audience all replied, "No." The Nirvana Sutra states, although the Buddha has no false words, he will expound other sutras if people rely on false teachings. And Grandmaster Tiantai stated that the Buddha's guarantee of Buddhahood to Hinayana Buddhists is the Buddha's temporal expedient words. It is not my personal opinion to say that sutras expounded in the 40 years or so before the Lotus Sutra were false words. They also complain that Nichiren asserts that chanting the Nembutsu is an act equivalent to falling into the Avicii hell. I certainly assert this, but again, it is not my personal opinion. The Buddha stated in the Expedience chapter in the first fascicle of the Lotus Sutra, "If I guide even a single man by the lesser vehicle, I shall be accused of stinginess. It is not good at all to do this." It is also stated in the Parable chapter in the second fascicle of the Lotus Sutra, "Some will despise the person who reads, recites, or upholds this Lotus Sutra. They will hate him, look at him with jealousy, and harbor enmity against him. When their present lives end, they will fall into the Avicii hell." Thus it is stated that if Shakyamuni preached only the Nembutsu and such sutras that do not reveal the truth as the Sutra of Meditation on the Buddha of Infinite Life, without expounding the Lotus Sutra, even he would not be able to avoid the three evil realms of hell's realms of hungry ghosts and beasts. Needless to say, if we ordinary people living in the latter age of degeneration practice only the Nembutsu, though without encouraging others to do the same, it is against the Buddha's will, and we will surely fall into the Avicii hell. This is similar to the people who do not obey their king, or the children who do not obey their parents receive punishment. How much more so would Dao Cho, Shan Dao of China, and Honen of Japan, who practiced only the Nembutsu, compared the Lotus Sutra with the Nembutsu, insisting that 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100 people who practice the Nembutsu attain Buddhahood, but no one can attain Buddhahood through the Lotus Sutra. This obviously goes against the Buddha's words quoted above. How can they not fall into the hell of incessant suffering? They also state in the petition that Nichiren insists that Zen Buddhism deludes people and disturbs their practice of the Buddhist way. But this is not my own opinion again. Zen Buddhists are proud to speak of their special transmission without scriptures or preachings. However, the Buddha states in his last words, anyone who insists that the true Dharma exists besides my sutras is a heavenly devil. How can Zen Buddhists who insist on the special transmission without scriptures or preachings escape from being heavenly devils? Their petition also points out that Nichiren insists that the Hinayana and Mahayana precepts delude people. I do not deny saying this, but let me explain what I mean. The Hinayana precepts have been refuted in the lifetime of the Buddha. After the Buddha passed away, there were three kinds of Buddhist temples in India, namely temples observing exclusively Hinayana precepts, those with exclusively Mahayana precepts, and those in which both Mahayana and Hinayana precepts were observed. Hinayana temples and Mahayana temples rejected each other, so much so that they even used separate roads to their temples. In Japan too, Chen, who came to Japan during the reign of Emperor Shomu, established the Hinayana precept daises, or platforms, at three places, Tadaiji Temple, Kanzeonji Temple, and Yakushiji Temple, during the reign of Emperor Koken. Later, however, during the reign of Emperor Kamu, Grandmaster Dingyo refuted the Hinayana precepts as unsuitable to the people in the latter age of degeneration. Gomyo and Keijin of Nara lost the debate. Moreover, high priests of the six schools of Buddhism in Nara submitted conceding letters and became believers of Grandmaster Dingyo. Does not this mean that Dengyo transmitted the Mahayana perfect and sudden precepts to them? Their letters of submission still exist, so I encourage you to read them with your own eyes. I'm surprised to hear that Ryokan and others holders of the Hinayana precepts in Japan today do not know this fact. They also accuse Nichiren of burning and throwing into the river the statues of Amitabha Buddha and Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, which he had believed in for many years. When they state this, they should cite a witness who can prove it. If they do not have proof, the Ryokan and his followers intend to charge me with the transgression of burning the statues or tossing them into the river, an act committed by themselves. Details will be made clear when we ask questions at the debate. However, as long as no summons is called, the great transgression is all Ryokan and his followers charge. The cause to break the 250 precepts is nothing but their false words. Therefore, there is no doubt that Ryokan falls into the hell of incessant suffering. They also state in their petition that Nichiren incites mobs at his house. The encouragement for upholding this sutra chapter, the Lotus Sutra states, residing in the monasteries, some monks preach the Dharma for those in power. Being respected as if they were sages, some monks seduce those in power and stand in the way of he who spreads the Lotus Sutra. When we compare these scriptural statements and their interpretations by Grandmaster Miaole, Tong Chun, and Dao Xian's supplement to the annotations on the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra, with the current situation in Japan, your proud temples such as Kenshoji, Jufukuji, Gokodakuji, Tahoji, Daibutsuden, Chodakuji, and Jokomyoji temples are the characteristic evil places pointed out by the Grandmaster Miaole, where the third kind of enemies of the Lotus Sutra live. Tung Chun also states, all evil men get together at Buddhist temples. And also two lines following the phrase, always stay among people, refers to he who slanders the true teaching before the king and his ministers, and accuses the man who spreads the true teaching. This also must be you priests. The plaintiffs also accuse Nichiren of storing weapons. Concerning this, the Nirvana Sutra, Grandmasters Tiantai, Chang'an, and Miaole state that possessing weapons to protect the Lotus Sutra is a law ordained by the Buddhist Dharma, and that this is like the king who collects weapons to protect his country. It is evident that the teachings spread by the Ryokan and others are evil because they cannot defend them against my criticism. Therefore, in order to defend their evil teachings, they have tempted protectors, stewards, and people to behead Nichiren or banish him from their lands by telling them that Nichiren and his disciples are their mortal enemies who burned and threw into the river the statues of Amitabha Buddha. As a result, Nichiren was wounded and hundreds of my disciples were killed. It recalls by the blatant lies of such priests as Ryokan, Nena, and Doa how shocked and afraid people with right minds would be upon knowing the truth. Nichiren Shonin describes how he was summoned to court on September 10th, 1271, by the commissioner Heino Zaimon Yoritsuna, in reminiscences from Tatsunokuchi to Minobu. Having no confidence of winning in debate or lawsuits, Nembutsu devotees, precept keepers, and Shingon priests curried the favor of widows of those in power, making false charges against me, saying I declared that the late lay priest Lord Saimyoji, Hojo Tokiori, and Gokodakuji, Hojo Shigetoki, had fallen into the hell of incessant suffering. That such Buddhist temples as Kenchoji, Jifukuji, Gokodakuji, Chodakuji, and Daibutsuji should be burned down, and that such Buddhist priests as Doryu and Ryokan, whom the late Tokiori and Shigetoki revered, must be beheaded. The Council of State decided that I should be punished, but that I should be summoned for questioning whether or not I in fact had made such derogative statements. Thus I was summoned on the 10th of the 9th month. A commissioner in the Council of State asked me whether I had really uttered such insistence as mentioned in written complaints presented to the shogunate from various quarters. In response, I declared, "They are all true, but it was not true that my insistence on the late Hojo Tokiori and Shigetoki going to hell was uttered after their death. I had maintained this doctrine since they were alive. In short, I stated them for the sake of this country. If you wish to keep this country in peace, you ought to give me the chance to meet those priests in debate to decide who is right. If you should listen only to their false charges and unreasonably punish me, in the end this country will surely encounter serious problems. If you exile or execute me, it would mean that you do not listen to a messenger of the Buddha. In that case, I am sure within 100 days, 1, 3, or 7 years after my exile or execution, a civil war would erupt, in which struggles among the Hojo families ensue due to a divine punishment from the king of the Brahma heaven, Indra, the sun and moon, and the 4 heavenly kings, protectors of the Lotus Sutra. Thereafter, this country would be threatened by foreign invasion from the 4 directions, especially from the west. It will be too late for you to regret." Thus I told Hei no Zaemon Nojo Yoritsuna, who became fiercely angry, like Taira no Kiyomori, going out of his mind, dispersing deep hatred of Nichiren, as though there were no people around. Furthermore, in Reminiscences from Tatsunokuchi to Minobu, Nichiren Shonin goes on to describe his subsequent arrest as part of the shogunate's effort to quell dissidents and present a united front against the Mongol threat. On the 12th of the 9th month of the 8th year of Bunei, 2 days after I was summoned by the Council of State, I was arrested. The way I was arrested seemed unusual and unlawful. Led by Hei no Zaemon Nojo, deputy commander of the Board of Retainers, several hundreds of soldiers clad in armor and eboshi hats, with glaring eyes and shouting angrily, came to arrest me. Witnessing this outrageousness, I said to myself, "This is what I have always been longing for. How lucky I am to be able to sacrifice my life for the sake of the Lotus Sutra. To be beheaded and lose my malodorous head is like exchanging sand for gold and pebbles for jewels." At that moment, Shobo, a ranking vassal of Zaemon Nojo Yoritsuna, rushed at me, snatched out the 5th fascicle of the Lotus Sutra from my bosom, beat my face with it 3 times, and tore it in pieces. Other soldiers scattered the remaining 9 fascicles of the Lotus Sutra, stepped on them, wrapped themselves in them, scattering them all over the straw mats or the wooden floor of the house. Seeing their riotous behavior, I uttered in a loud voice, "How interesting! Everybody, look at Hei no Zaemon Nojo Yoritsuna losing his head. He's now going to fell the pillar of Japan." It appeared that Zaemon Nojo and his vassals, as well as the onlookers, were all struck dumb and astonished. Nichiren was the one in disgrace with the shogunate, and therefore he should have appeared nervous under such circumstances. But on the contrary, it was the poor soldiers who looked like cowards and were pale with fear, perhaps because they were regretful of having torn and scattered the sacred sutra. On the 10th and in the evening of the 12th of the 9th month, I explained in detail to Hei no Zaemon Nojo Yoritsuna that the Shingon sect was an evil teaching that would destroy the country. Zen Buddhism was a false teaching of heavenly devils. Nembutsu, or calling the name of the Buddha of infinite light, led only to hell, and that priest Ryokan's prayer for rain did not cause rain. While listening to my story, he sometimes scornfully laughed at me, and other times got fiercely angry, details of which are too minute to write. In selecting the right time, Senji Sho, Nichiren Shonin states that on this occasion he gave the second of 3 warnings to the shogunate. At about 4 p.m. on the 12th of the 9th month in the 8th year of Bunei, I declared to Hei no Zaemon Nojo, when he came to arrest me at Matsubagaatsu, "I, Nichiren, am the chief support of Japan. When you kill me, you will cut the pillar of Japan. Before long, there will be a civil war in which the Japanese people fight among themselves, and foreign invasion, in which many people in Japan will not only be killed, but also captured by foreign invaders. Unless all the temples of the Pure Land and Zen schools such as Kenchoji, Jifukuji, Gokodakuji, Daibutsu-den, and Chodakuji are burned down, and their priests all beheaded at Yuigahama Beach, Japan will be bound to be destroyed." It is unfortunate that Nichiren Shonin resorted to this kind of rhetoric. Today, many give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he was not making a serious suggestion, that he was being sarcastic or only speaking metaphorically. That may be. I certainly hope that it was the case, but I can only report what he said, and speculate on what he actually meant by it. I think we should also recall that Nichiren wrote to his followers not to react violently to the provocations of others and to stay calm and polite during debates, and even to refrain from debating unless it was an official debate sponsored by the authorities to determine the truth or falsity of Buddhist doctrine. In Risho and Kokuran, he made it clear that he was not looking to have slanderers executed, but only for the government to stop giving their support to slanderous teachings that Nichiren Shonin believed led people into deeper delusion and were even destructive to society. In any case, Nichiren Buddhists who wish to uphold the Lotus Sutra will only dishonor the sutra by indulging in violent rhetoric and other forms of wrong speech, much less indulging in or approving of actual violence. It also dishonors our founder, Nichiren Shonin, by presuming that we are emulating him by using wrong speech or advocating violence. Further in Reminiscences, Nichiren Shonin goes on to describe what happened next. It was the night of the 12th of the 9th month when I was placed under arrest by Hojo Nobutoki, lord of Musashi province, and was led out of Kamakura to be beheaded at midnight. We proceeded along the beach of Yuigahama and in front of the Goryeo shrine. I told the escorting soldiers, please stop for a while. Here I have a person to whom I want to inform about this matter. I sent a young man named Kumao Maro to Nakatsukasa Saburozaima Nojo, or Shijo Kengo, who came to see me in a hurry. I told him, I am going to be beheaded tonight. This is what I've been longing for the past several years. In past lives, I was born in the Saha world many times. Sometimes I was born as a pheasant to be captured by a hawk, and other times as a rat to be eaten by a cat. Even when I was born as a human being, I lost my life for my wife, children, and enemies more often than the number of particles of the great earth, without sacrificing my life for the sake of the Lotus Sutra even once. As a result, I was born to this world as a poor monk, unable to serve my parents as much as I would like and repay what I owe to my country. This is the time for me to dedicate my head to the Lotus Sutra and present its merits to my parents and what is left to my disciples and followers. This is what I've been saying these days, and it will become a reality tonight. Shijo Kengo and his 3 brothers came along as far as Tatsunokuchi of Koshigoe, holding on to the reins of my horse. Just at the time when I was thinking this must be the place where I would be beheaded, the soldiers began to get excited, gathering around me. Shijo Kengo began to cry, saying, "The last moment has come." Looking at this, I uttered, "How cowardly you all are. I'm glad you are laughing at such a wonderful occasion as this, when I am now going to present my malodorous head to the Lotus Sutra. Why do you break the promise you had made?" Just at this moment, something shining like the moon flew like a ball from Enoshima Island from southeast to northwest. It was before daybreak, the night of the 12th, and was still too dark to see the faces of the people. However, the night was brightened by the shining object for us to see our faces as clearly as on a moonlit night. The executioner who was ready to kill Nichiren fell down on the ground, blinded. The soldiers became frightened. Some ran away as far as 100 meters. Others dismounted from their horses and squatted down on the ground, and still others remained stiff on horseback. I, Nichiren, shouted, "Why do you stay away from a felon like me? Come back here quickly." None of them, however, came near me in a hurry. "Daybreak is coming very soon. What can you do if it gets light? If you have to kill me, do it right away. It would be unsightly when it gets light." Thus I shouted to them, but there was no response. Some scholars believe that this part of the Shujuon Fudomai was a later interpolation. Eiichi Tero writes, in his letter to the lay priest of Ichinosawa, Nichiren Shonin writes of his execution, or the delay of execution, it was because of particular circumstances. But he does not give any clear details of what happened. It is thought that the stay of execution might have been due to the wife of Hojo Tokimune becoming pregnant. Killing a priest during such a time could possibly negatively influence the pregnancy and safe birth of the child. One of Nichiren Shonin's lay followers, Daigaku Sabudo, mentioned that it might have been Adachi Yasumori, the father of the wife of Tokimune, who had stopped the execution, advising Tokimune against it. During the pregnancy of Yasumori's grandson, who later became Hojo Sadatoki, the 9th regent of the Kamakura shogunate. This 4th persecution is commemorated on September 12th as the Tatsunokuchi persecution. With that, I bring the second part of this three-part presentation of the life and teachings of Nichiren Shonin to a close. I hope that this presentation was helpful and informative and will help to enrich your faith in and practice of Nichiren Buddhism.